All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Restored Mind Show. My name is Matt Cotty, and thank you so much for tuning in. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about anxiety and job dissatisfaction and why those two go so hand in hand. And this is a question that I get pretty often, when it comes to, different clients and groups and, all the different things that I do. I mean, it's a question I hear a lot, and I guess it comes in different formats, being dissatisfied with a job and that causing anxiety. But then in this episode, what I want to talk about are kind of three main things that I see people run into that causes dissatisfaction, and talk about why that produces anxiety from that perspective, right? Because let's be real, all jobs are different, right? And what causes people to get anxious isn't necessarily the same for everyone, right? So I want to talk about kind of three main things that I see that really causes a lot of dissatisfaction in jobs, and as a result, anxiety, right? So first off, let's kind of talk about that. Anxiety is usually a secondary response to the initial dissatisfaction. And the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to jobs is just the environment of the job you're working in and why that can produce anxiety. So, there's a period where I worked for Child Protective Services, and it's a very high stress job, and large caseloads, and to be transparent, the environment in the office was just the morale of just the work setting that I was in was really low, right? And this is a thing that, yes, you probably can't quantify it, meaning there's probably not this number, right? Or this actual tangible thing you can say, but when there's low morale on a team, everyone knows it, right? Or most people anyway. And when there's low morale for a long period of time and it's left unaddressed, that can have certain psychological effects on people in that team environment. And this goes for obviously any kind of team. But when we're talking about kind of the workplace and anxiety, what can happen is when the environment that you're in is stressful. Now that could be because it's a stressful job, or like I said, it could be, just because the overall just atmosphere that you work in. You might just work in something that just no one's happy to go to, right? And you just keep showing up day after day, and nothing's really changing. And I think that and then what can happen is you can actually get anxious about going to work, right? I think, and so when anxiety comes from environment, I feel like that's usually what I hear people saying, and I know I experienced myself too, is I didn't want to go, right? It was when it was the weekend, it was yes. And then even in the back of my head, sometimes I remember on Friday, I was dang, dude, Monday's coming way too quick, and, I was just I would dread Monday. And obviously that's when I realized I needed to make a change, because I was this is not how I need to be spending my time on this planet, when it comes to just not just always resenting and not liking where I was going, for a good portion of my life, right? And that's so when it comes to an environmental issue, a lot of that is beyond your control. And the best things you can do to combat that are, one, obviously change the environment, or two, change your perspective, right? But the worst thing you can do is just to keep going and to keep letting that eat you up, because then it leads to feelings of resentment, and then that can really go down a bad path if you let it. And so, that environment, right, obviously, is an important factor when it comes to feeling anxious and having anxiety associated with work. The second would be duties, right? So, and I'm going to just say responsibilities or duties or whatever. But this idea of, the actual day-to-day tasks that you do cause you anxiety. And in this situation, there's many positions and jobs that, sometimes you have to make choices that can have a trickle effect of many things, right? I remember one person that I from a team that I was kind of involved with, more on I guess kind of an outside consultant role. But, this person was having to lay people off, right? Because the company just wasn't doing well. And so they were making the complete structural changes, and this person was having to call people in their office, on almost not a daily, but I'd say several people per week, it seemed like, and having to fire them, right? And to essentially give them the worst news. And that obviously ties into the video the episode we just did with, unemployment and anxiety, right? But I mean, for the most part, when I've talked to people who have to, are in positions where they have to fire people or let people go, it's very rare that someone likes doing that, right? I mean, that's a hard thing to do. A lot of times, the anxiety that person's experiencing, knowing that they're going to, turn your life upside down is really, really stressful. And this particular person that I was talking to, that was where they were at that time. They were just having to do all these cuts, and it was really eating them up inside. And so this duty of having to fire people again and again and again and again and have these really hard conversations and watch these emotional breakdowns was just too much for this person on a consistent basis. And so the duty of having to do that was what causing them to be anxious, right? The company, the environment, obviously that wasn't really the stressor. It was the act of what they had to do each day. And in that situation, if it is, and I mean, obviously there's high stress jobs like air traffic controllers, police officers, firemen, right? Where you're getting thrown into stressful situations. And really, if the duties that you're going to do on a day-to-day basis cause you a bunch of anxiety and cause you a bunch of stress, and that role isn't going to change, well then, full transparency, it might be a good idea to consider a shift into something else, because your ability to manage, your emotional state on a day-to-day basis is going to be really important to your, not only your long-term health, but also your teammates and everyone else that relies on you. So that is just another thing that I think it causes a lot of people anxiety when it comes to their task at work. And then the third thing I want to talk about is personal growth. And I think a thing that really makes a lot of people anxious is this idea of good old father time, right? That we have this finite amount of time on this earth, right? And none of us knows how long that really is. And when you're working a position that isn't challenging you or isn't helping you grow, isn't helping you become the kind of person that you really know you can become, that can cause anxiety, and it does cause a lot of anxiety for people, because they're like, well, what am I doing? Like what am I doing with myself? What am I doing with, all this stuff, all this time that I have, right? Because we know that this time is our most valuable resource, right? And if you feel like you're doing something that's not challenging you, not helping you grow, you're plateauing, right? And even if it's not in the forefront of your mind, like deep down, that. And what can happen is you can start to get anxious, because the longer you allow yourself to plateau, the harder it is to get back on that upward trajectory, right? And people can become complacent. And so I think one thing that really does cause a lot of people anxiety is this idea of, if they realize that they're not growing and then not doing anything about that, right? Not learning new skill sets to try to advance themselves or take a different position. Because a lot of people, that fear of change just really holds them back. That anxiety about, I have this right now and I'm okay here, even though I know I don't really like this or this and that, but I'm okay, right? And they kind of settle for okay. And that can produce a lot of anxiety, because ultimately we know that end's coming for all of us. And I think that when you lay it out and time-wise for yourself, that can really produce a lot of anxiety. And in that situation, if you're not growing and not pushing yourself, the thing I would tell you is like to just start making incremental changes when it comes to your growth trajectory. And that can even just be learning a new skill, right? And where you can add more value to the company. Or if it is something where you're like, hey, I'm working in a field that I don't want to be working in, then sometimes it is about making those big changes in life. And oftentimes the change that you really want to make, and it's just about you taking the steps to actually do it. So that kind of ties up again those 3 levels of, environmental anxiety, duties or responsibilities anxiety, and then growth anxiety as an individual. And really, those are just some practical ideas on maybe how to start addressing anxiety if that is what you're dealing with in the workplace. So thank you so much for tuning in this episode. And again, we have some free resources in the links down below. And we also have free resources on our website at restoredminds.com, along with, our programs as well, if you are dealing with OCD and anxiety, especially. So thank you so much again for tuning in. And, we'll continue this series next week as we keep going. And so if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, because we're going to continue on this series on workplace environment and anxiety. So thank you. And I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you soon.